up YouTube? Welcome to today's video where I'm going to talk about the harvest crafts that GGG removed, and I do think a lot of these crafts should probably be returned to the game. Now I'm not really sure how GGG decided which ones to remove. I think that Chris probably went through the list of crafts, or not Chris, but a GGG employee went through the list of crafts and pretty much chose some crafts randomly that just seemed really strong without really considering the implications of what they chose. And mostly, I'm pretty sure they chose a lot of deterministic crafts. You can see here, this is the current hoarder crafting station we have, and there are actually a lot of crafts that are missing. Now, GGG did decide to lower the cost for a lot of harvest crafts, which is definitely a step in the right direction. If you look at the most recent patch notes, they said that they were removing or lowering the cost of some crafts by even up to 90%, and some of these include fractures. So just to see, there's actually a pretty big change for crafting, and it's the fact that there's 4 mod fracture. And what 4 mod fracture does is it allows you to actually fracture cluster jewels, and that should be very, very OP for crafting. So I do think that cluster jewels will be extremely, extremely easy to make, especially the ones that are considered very, very expensive, like you fractured on Fan of Blades or something like that, then it's going to be a huge benefit. So you can see here, these are some of the ones that they changed. So they have a lot of augment crafts that removes a modifier and then adds a modifier. And they have the costs pretty much cut in half. So there's a lot of costs that are a lot better. And this is definitely very good for the state of the game, because some of the harvest crafts in its current iteration are just extremely overpriced in terms of how much life force you're getting. Some people on standard were calculating, even with Magic Find, and they're doing the harvest with full juice maps, they were only getting, I think, around like 600 life force a plot or something, making it so that they needed to do 65 maps in order to get one fractured craft in the end, which is an insane amount of maps. But let's go straight into what the top 5 harvest crafts that should be brought back into the game. So first off, we have a craft that was pretty much removed. I'm not really sure why they removed it, because this craft is not really that deterministic. It does add a bunch of player power in terms of, or not really a bunch of player power. It adds player customization for the end game, in that it actually allows you to fix some of your ailment issues. A lot of builds would use stun avoidance jewels. A lot of builds would use poison avoidance or shock avoidance to make up that little bit of ailment avoidance they actually needed. Now, some builds would even use endurance charge duration or frenzy charge duration and combine it with the eldritch implicit on the chest piece, so that they could have endurance charges up the whole time. So a lot of these crafts are also weighted. I know that chance to avoid being stunned is extremely, extremely rare. I actually played the gauntlet. I leveled to almost 100 in the gauntlet, and I never saw a chance to avoid stun once, and I was pretty much doing harvest religiously. Now, I do think the right solution for this is to increase the life force cost of jewel implicit instead of just completely removing them. Removing this craft pretty much removes a lot of the customizability for the min-maxing of endgame builds, and I do think that this should exist in its current state. And this is pretty much just a removal of player power for no reason at all. Now, next up, we have the 5-link craft. This one is not really that big, and it's more of a minor annoyance in SSF. Now, this craft is very, very important in SSF. A lot of times you start off mapping in SSF, and you don't really get that many fusings, especially like 100 or 200 fusings right away. And it is very possible you go through 100 or 200 fusings and you never actually get a 5-link. And it's very common. I have leveled in SSF before, and I've gotten level 90 and I was still stuck with a 4-link, and that's just very, very unfortunate. So the 5-link craft is also super important because it allows you to spam your fusings on your body armor. So say you have like a couple hundred fusings or whatever, and you wanted to throw it on the chest piece. So you pretty much spam it, and then you can always go back to a 5-link if you have the 5-link craft saved on your hoarder crafting station. Now you can see here, these are pretty much the values for the 5-link craft or 6-link craft, and you can see the 5-link craft is actually pretty common. So they pretty much removed a really common deterministic craft to some degree that should honestly be in the game, because it sucks to play with 4-link when you're still super high level. You can see here that 6-link craft was exceptionally rare, so that's why a lot of people never really even saw it. Now, next up, we have socket color reforges. Now, this is something that I was really, really annoyed about, purely because I like using the brass dome for some of my builds, and it's really hard to get green and blue sockets on a brass dome. The brass dome for instance, has a very high attribute requirement, making it impossible to get blue and green sockets. And this makes it incredibly hard to color certain body armors for some builds. And that includes Iron Fortress with Chaos Venom Jar, where you need to get, I think, 3 greens and 3 blues on a red armor base. And it feels extremely bad for certain builds to be gated by the colors due to the base type of the item. And this does limit build diversity drastically. Now, you might be saying maybe some of these crafts are too deterministic. And I do think maybe reforging the color of a random socket on an item turning it white should probably not be included. And some of these other ones, I think maybe you could argue like reforged color non-blue to blue should not be included. But ones like these, like reforged color of 2 random sockets on an item, turning them blue and green, red and blue, and red and green, I feel like have a pretty good argument for being included because it's not that deterministic, but it does allow you to fix a major problem for builds and improve quality of life. Now, this next one is one that a lot of people are mad about, especially in SSF. If you have ever played SSF before, you know that Reforged more likely is definitely one of the backbones, or Reforged much more likely is one of the backbones of SSF, in that people, if they want suppression gear, they'll pretty much craft suppression on the bench, and then they would go to the hoarder crafting station and then press Reforged much more likely, and they would have 100x more chance to roll that mod that were on the item. So now Reforged more likely is 10x instead of 100x, making the craft almost useless. So you can see here, someone said Reforge a rare item being much more / less likely to receive the same modifier types, and now it is Reforge a rare item being more likely and being less likely instead of much more or much less. Now the sad part about this is if you ever saw the trailer, and the trailer actually had the original craft, which was much more and much less likely. So you might think it's just one word, right? But as I said before, it is now 10x instead of 100x waiting for the certain mod. Now, SSF did rely on this craft a lot for gear upgrades, and without it, it feels really, really bad to play with. Now, another thing to note is that currently the game is bugged in that people who were actually using being more likely was actually using being less likely. So they actually flipped the 2 crafts around, so a lot of people trying out the craft probably never even got the right mod just because GGG accidentally messed up implementing it. Now, there's another craft that was actually removed that a lot of people are annoyed about, and it is Reforged X item more likely to have X modifiers, which seems completely unnecessary to remove. So what this means is that you have crafts like Reforged Life more likely, and then Reforged Attack more likely. These were very useful in crafting gear and cluster jewels, and it's just completely unnecessary to remove it. It's not really deterministic at all, so I'm not really sure why they were so hung up on removing a craft like that. Now, next up, we have the big one, and I do think that this craft right here is one of the biggest ones in terms of implications for endgame crafting. And this is because it pretty much ruins any meta crafting procedure. Now, what I mean by this is when you're meta crafting an item, you usually have 3 prefixes or suffixes that you finish first. Most of the times when you craft, you try to finish the prefixes or suffixes first, and then you use the meta mod to craft on prefixes / suffixes cannot be changed. And then after that, you're able to use Reforge X, allowing you to target attack speed, crit, or influence mods. So right now, we can pretty much see a case. So let me go over here real fast and go to Craft of Exile. So this one right here, you can see here, say someone by some miracle got triple T1 prefixes, and this is doable, especially if you fracture this mod right here. And that makes it a lot easier because you just spam some essences until you got dictators, which is unlikely, but if you kept trying, it would probably happen. Now here you can see you craft on the meta mod prefixes cannot be changed, and then you reforge speed to try to get attack speed. Now this is something that a lot of people do, and wow, I just hit T1 attack speed. But the problem with this method is if you keep doing this, and I do think that this emulator thing is kind of bugged, in that you will eventually reach 3 mods, because I actually tried this a lot and it never filled it up, but in my experience with actually playing the game, it is pretty often that you fill it up. So let's just say I don't really want to keep spamming this thing because it's not really correct. So say right here, you have 3 mods on the item. So now you actually can't remove it. Before you could just do Reforge keep suffix, or wow, they actually got rid of all of these things on the thing. So right now, if you actually filled up the suffixes, the only choice you have is to annul to try to have an open suffix so that you can craft on prefixes cannot be changed again. So right here, you can see we just completely brick the item. So we actually have to go back to essence spamming, and we're going all the way back to step 1. And that's just something that can happen a lot. So again, we got rid of the mod. And right here, if we actually got the suffix off, then we can craft on prefixes cannot be changed and just do more reforged speeds. Now, what this means is that endgame crafting for GG items will lead you to eventually breaking your item back to step 1. And this is something that will happen if you spend a lot of money metamodding or metamod crafting. So that's pretty much the main reason why reforged key prefix and suffix needs to be in the game in order for people to have any hope in crafting a super endgame item. Now, you might be wondering, what will this mean if none of these changes are actually re-implemented back into the game? Well, without reforged key prefix and suffix, you can still target a mod by crafting on prefixes and suffixes cannot be changed and using the new augment harvest craft. So the way this works is that this does not actually work on influence items because you actually cannot use an augment craft with harvest, with influence items. So you can see here, if this was an influence item, you can't actually aug speed or something like that, and it just doesn't work. So right now, the Craft of Exile is not really updated correctly, so I'm going to show you how the new endgame crafting is going to be like if they don't change anything. Now, this does work for certain items, and it's pretty much more or less the same as before in terms of getting one mod, but let's see here. So right now, the new Harvest Augment will randomly remove a mod, but I think you can guarantee it in terms of making it always remove a suffix if you craft on prefixes cannot be changed. So let's go find a craft. If you do prefixes cannot be changed and you do aug speed, it should theoretically take this off and guarantee you a speed mod. But right now, this thing doesn't really work. But that's pretty much how this wand was made. So you can see here, this wand is actually in the league and it's probably one of the first mirrorable items I've seen. So what this guy did was he fractured on Merciless, and he spammed essences until he got T1, I think this is Dictators. And then he pretty much used aug speed with prefixes cannot be changed until he got T1 attack speed. And after you get T1 attack speed, you have to do the Ashling step, which is kind of annoying, but let's just say he eventually got T1 attack speed. So let's go here and let's give him T1 attack speed. So if you get T1 attack speed, at this point, you're pretty much done, or not done. You have a 50-50 you need to do. So you go to suffixes in terms of the craft. Prefixes cannot be changed and craft it on. And then you do Ashling and you just pray. But at this point, you see the difference between this is that you don't go back all the way to step 1. You have a checkpoint and then your prefixes will always be finished. And right here, so you remove the attack speed, so you failed that, and you remove the attack speed again. And now you finally got it, and you got 7% chance to deal double damage. And now you go to your bench craft and you craft on crit chance, strength, and int for Omni. And that's pretty much it, right? Or instacker or whatever. But that's pretty much how this wand was made. So you can see here that there is still a way around reforged key prefix and suffix as long as your item is not influenced. But if your item is influenced, then you are just out of luck. And I do want to mention the new fracture is extremely, extremely powerful. And I do think that most of the items that will end up getting crafted are just going to be essences on a fracture base and spamming the augment harvest craft. And if you ever get something bad, you can just wipe the suffixes or prefixes. And I do think that that is going to be the new meta for crafting. Now, overall, crafting has always existed before harvest. Like, people don't understand that crafting existed before harvest, and people were just pretty much spamming fossils and essences and imprint beasts. But the problem with that is it was a slot machine simulator. Like, pretty much chaos spamming or essence spamming or fossil spamming just feels awful because there's no determinism at all. And we're not really asking for determinism. We're asking for checkpoints in crafting so that you can incrementally make upgrades to your crafting item so you can slowly make progress towards finishing an item. And I do know a lot of people say, well, in certain games like BDO, for instance, you can completely brick your item, and a lot of people consider that fun. But the fact of the matter is the player base does not like that. People like incrementally crafting. People like having checkpoints in crafting. And people like being able to actually make GG endgame items if they invest enough currency into it. So many of the harvest crafts that were removed in this list are huge quality of life, and some of them are not even really that deterministic. So I do think that some of these, and especially reforged key prefix and suffix, should definitely be returned to the game in terms of having a healthy state of crafting that is not completely RNG. Like, no one wants to be chaos spamming and closing their eyes and exalt slamming their item. Well, maybe some of you, but thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors, exalts, and mage bloods than me, and see you next time. Bye.